Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to cut through the noise on big topics.
That's the plan.
And today, it's a really critical one. Can carbon storage actually solve climate change?
A huge question.
Yeah, and we've got some fascinating new science to dig into. There's this significant Nature paper, plus a Forbes piece by material scientist Phil DeLuna.
Both offer some, well, pretty eye-opening perspectives.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the real potential, but also, crucially, the very real limits of geologic carbon storage.
Getting beyond the headlines.
Right, helping you understand not just what the experts are saying, but maybe more importantly, why it matters for, well, for all of us and the planet.
Okay, let's do it.
So for years, many of us kind of heard this idea, right?
Yes.
That underground, the Earth's subsurface, it's this massive, almost infinite space.
Like a giant warehouse for CO2.
Precisely. Like we could just stash all our excess carbon dioxide down there, problem solved, felt comforting, you know.
It did offer a sense of a backstop, I suppose.
But this new research, particularly the Nature paper led by Matthew Giddon, it really throws that comforting idea into question. It reframes the whole thing.
It really does. What's so interesting about this paper is that it goes way beyond just, like, the theoretical maximum space down there.
Yep.
It asks a much tougher question. What's prudently usable? So, what can we realistically and safely use?
Prudently usable. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, it means mapping out all the real-world constraints. Things like how close are these potential storage basins to where people live?
Right.
What's the seismic risk? Are we talking about protected ecosystems? What about the right depth for the rock and water? And even, messy geopolitics.
Wow. Okay. So layering on all those real-world factors.
Exactly. And when you do that, the picture changes dramatically.
And the answer they came up with?
Yeah.
What was the number?
They landed on a planetary limit of around 1,460 billion tons of COGO.
Okay, 1,460 billion. That still sounds like a massive number, doesn't it?
It is huge, objectively. But compare it to the estimates that were floating around before. People were talking 10, maybe even 40 trillion tons.
Whoa, so this is an order of magnitude smaller.
Easily. It's a completely different scale of resource than we might have thought.
So what does that really mean then for solving climate change, if that's our budget?
Well, the authors did a calculation. If we dedicated all of that 1,460 billion tons purely to carbon removal, pulling CO2 out of the air,
Yeah.
it would only lower global temperatures by roughly 0.7 degrees Celsius.
0.7 degrees. That's significant, I guess, but maybe not the silver bullet people hoped for.
Precisely. It's a meaningful lever, absolutely. But it forces us to see carbon storage not as this endless solution, but as a finite resource.
Finite. And maybe even precious.
Exactly. An intergenerational resource that we have to budget really carefully.
Okay, that drop is really stark, from potentially tens of trillions down to 1,460 billion. What are the biggest factors chopping that number down? Why is the prudent limit so much lower?
That's the key question, right? The Nature paper breaks it down really well. They start with a technical potential, like the absolute maximum geological space, which is around 11,800 gigatons of CO2.
Okay, so still huge initially.
Still huge, but then they apply these exclusion layers. First up, geophysical risks.
Meaning?
Meaning you can't just pump CO2 anywhere. You need the right kind of geology-stable sedimentary basins. Often that means old oil and gas fields or deep salty aquifers.
Makes sense.
And you have to exclude areas with active earthquakes or even places with a history of moderate quakes, because injecting CO2 adds pressure.
Which could trigger more quakes.
Yeah.
Or cause leaks.
Exactly. It could induce seismicity or mess up the seals holding the CO2, and then there's depth.
Ah, right. You mentioned depth earlier.
Yeah, it needs to be at least 1 kilometer deep. That ensures the CO2 is in this dense, liquid-like, supercritical state so you can store more.
Okay.
But you can't go too deep either. Generally no more than 2.5 kilometers. Go deeper and you risk destabilizing bedrock or hitting deep faults.
So there's a sweet spot, geologically speaking.
There is. And even offshore, where there's potentially lots of space, current tech mostly limits us to water depths of 300 meters or less. Deeper is just too expensive and risky right now.
Got it. So geology is complex. It's not just about empty space. It's about the right kind of safe, stable space. What else gets excluded?
Well, next comes environmental and human health risks. This is obviously crucial.
Non-negotiable, you hope.
Absolutely. So all protected areas are out. National parks, conservation zones, you name it. Plus the Arctic and Antarctic polar circles, too fragile, too inaccessible.
Okay.
And critically, they apply a 25-kilometer buffer zone around anywhere people live.
25 kilometers. That sounds like quite a lot. Why so large?
It's a safety measure. If Ca2 were to leak, it can be dangerous. It can displace oxygen, obviously, but it can also make groundwater acidic.
Acidic. How?
It forms carbonic acid when it dissolves in water. That can lower the pH and potentially mobilize toxic heavy metals that are naturally in the rock, getting them into water supplies.
Yikes. Okay, so that buffer makes a lot of sense for protecting communities.
Definitely. You're safeguarding health and water quality.
So we've got geology, environment, human health. What about the people side of things on a bigger scale? Like politics?
Ah, yes. Policy and geopolitical risks. Often underestimated. This isn't just a technical problem.
How so?
Well, look at Europe. Some countries there already ban or severely restrict CCS. Public opinion can be skeptical, sometimes linking CCS to just, letting fossil fuel companies off the hook.
Right, the perception issue. Does it enable continued emissions, or is it a necessary tool?
Exactly. That debate impacts political support, and internationally. It's complicated, sharing storage sites that cross borders, especially under the sea. The treaties for that are still basically being worked out.
So if a good storage site sits under the border between two countries.
It gets trickier. The study actually applied a 6 nautical-mile buffer along land borders in its main estimate, assuming cooperation might be lacking.
Okay, so geology, safety, environment, policy, international relations. You layer all that on, and that 11,800 GAP potential shrinks way down to the 4,460 GAP per diem limit.
That's the process. It's a serious reality check on just how much is truly practically available.
It really is. Okay, so the space is limited, much more than we thought. But here's where the Forbes article and Phil DeLuna's points add another layer. They argue the real bottleneck isn't even the space.
Yeah, this is maybe the most sobering part. It's the speed, the rate of deployment.
Speed, meaning how fast we can actually build this stuff.
Exactly. Even if we had, say, 5,000 billion tons of prudent storage, we are nowhere near building the infrastructure fast enough to use it meaningfully.
How far off are we?
Think about this. Right now, all the world's operating CCS facilities combined store about 50 million tons of co-Euro per year. 50 million.
Right.
And the pipeline of projects expected by the 2030s, that might get us to a few 100 million tons per year.
A few 100 million sounds like, decent industrial growth, maybe.
By normal industry standards, maybe. But by climate standards, it's tiny.
What scale do we actually need for the climate?
Well, pathways aiming for net zero CO2 around 2050, like in the Paris Agreement, they require injection rates of about 8.7 billion tons of co-Euros per year.
8.7 billion, compared to 50 million now.
Yes, billion with a B. To put that in perspective, 8.7 billion tons a year is roughly the same scale, industrially, as the entire global oil production industry today.
We have to build the equivalent of the entire global oil industry, but running in reverse in about 25 years.
That's the scale of the challenge. It's a monumental industrial mobilization. Unprecedented, really.
That really puts the numbers in perspective. The gap is enormous.
It is. Think about it in terms of individual sites. Let's say a typical large site stores 1 million tons per year.
Okay, a standard unit.
To hit that 8.7 billion tons per year target by the early 2050s, we'd need about 8,700 of those sites operating simultaneously.
8,700.
And to get there, we'd need to bring online 170 new, fully operational sites every single week between now and mid-century.
Every week. 170 new sites, not just planned, but built, drilled, piped, permitted, monitored with community buy-in.
Fully operational every single week for decades.
Wow. Okay, suddenly arguing about whether the theoretical limit is 1.5 trillion or 12 trillion tons feels...
Almost like academic hair splitting.
Yeah. The real problem isn't necessarily the ultimate size of the warehouse. It's whether we can even build the loading docks and forklifts fast enough.
That's a great analogy. The choke point isn't the absolute geological ceiling, it's the tempo. It's the sheer speed and scale challenge of deployment.
Which is humbling, considering how long big infrastructure projects usually take.
Exactly. So if storage is limited and it's slow to deploy, what does that tell us?
It tells me we need to be incredibly careful about how we use the capacity we can build. Strategic.
Precisely. Its highest and best use has got to be for the really tough stuff. Those hard-to-abate industrial sectors, cement, steel, some chemicals, places where emissions are just baked into the process.
And maybe for durable carbon removals, too.
Yeah.
Taking CO2 back out of the air.
Yes, definitely for durable removals. What it should not be is kind of a permission slip.
A permission slip.
Yeah, like a reason to slow down on electrifying transport or deploying renewables faster, or to just keep burning fossil fuels without capture indefinitely. It's too limited and too slow for that.
That makes sense. So this strategic view, it must have big implications for hitting those Paris Agreement goals, like keeping warming to 1.5 degrees C.
Huge implications. Many of the official IPCC scenarios that manage to stay near 1.5 degrees rely on hitting that 8.7 gigaton per year injection rate around 2050.
The rate we just said requires an unprecedented scale-up.
The very same. And even if we did manage that, maintaining those rates would actually use up our entire prudent planetary budget of 1,460 GT within about 250 years, according to most of those scenarios.
So even in optimistic deployment scenarios, it runs out relatively quickly on a climate timescale.
Yes. And for some regions, like Asia, with its large, rapidly developing economies, the models show they could exceed their regional prudent storage limits even sooner, potentially this century.
Wow. Okay, and thinking about the temperature impact again, you said 0.7 degrees C potential reduction if used only for removals.
That's the max potential, roughly 0.7 degrees C. But crucially, if some of that limited storage space is used instead to, say, capture emissions from a new gas power plant,
Then less is available for actual removal, and the temperature benefit goes down.
exactly. The potential temperature reversal gets reduced proportionally. A more conservative estimate, factoring in uncertainties, might put the maximum reversal potential closer to 0.4 degrees C.
So not insignificant, but really underscores that it's a limited tool, not a total fix.
And it means the demand for storage doesn't just stop when we hit net zero emissions. If we're still using any fossil fuels, even with capture, or if we need ongoing removals, that demand continues, potentially indefinitely.
This also really highlights the fairness and equity issues, doesn't it? If it's a finite global resource.
Absolutely. The geology isn't fair. The prudent potential is spread very unevenly.
Who has the most?
Countries like Russia, the USA, Canada, often nations with high historical emissions and high GDP, tend to have good potential geologically.
Okay.
But other places, like much of Europe, actually see their potential shrink quite a bit when you apply all the prudent constraints.
And what about developing nations?
That's a key point. Some developing countries, like Indonesia or Brazil, might have significant storage potential but contributed very little historically to the climate problem.
So they might not have the internal drivers or the money to develop that storage, even if it could benefit the whole world.
Precisely. Without financial help or technology transfer, that potential might go untapped. The sources strongly suggest that countries with the oil and gas expertise.
Like the US, Canada, Norway, Gulf states.
Exactly. They should be incentivized to pivot to become net injectors of carbon, not just extractors, using their skills for storage.
A big shift in mindset for those industries and nations.
Unnecessary one, perhaps.
Okay, so pulling this all together, limited space, huge speed challenge, strategic importance, equity issues. What needs to happen now? What should leaders be doing tomorrow morning? The sources had clear recommendations, right?
Yes. 4 key takeaways for action.
Okay, number 1.
First, treat storage like the scarce public good it is. It needs to be explicitly budgeted in national climate plans, not just assumed to be infinite.
And reserve for.
Reserved strategically for those hard-to-abate sectors and high-quality, durable removals, not used to delay faster, cheaper options like electrification.
Got it. Budget it, prioritize it. Number 2.
Second, build shared transport and storage hubs immediately. A big reason projects fail is the connection issue. No pipe, no port, no access to the storage site, the pore space.
The infrastructure gap.
Right. So the idea is maybe public investment in the main backbone pipelines and storage hubs with private companies connecting into them, like highways and the local roads.
Makes sense. Pragmatic. Third point.
Third, align permits, standards, and a special confidence.
Yeah, the not in my backyard issue could be huge.
It could. So you need transparency, robust, verifiable monitoring for leaks, clear rules, and crucially, long-term stewardship plans and funding who make sure it stays safe for centuries.
Trust is key. Okay, and the fourth recommendation.
Fourth, focus the finance. Countries that are rich in storage potential and have strong economies.
Like the US, Canada, Norway, Australia, the Gulf states you mentioned.
Yes. They should lead. They should aim to become net injectors of CO2, storing more than they emit, potentially. And they should help finance storage development and access for regions that lack the geology or the means.
So principles of fairness and responsibility in action.
That's the idea. It connects back to the equity point.
This is definitely a powerful call to action. It shifts the focus from just, can we do it theoretically,
Right.
to how do we do it practically, safely, fairly, and fast enough.
Right. The how and the how fast become the dominant questions.
So wrapping up this deep dive, it's clear that geologic carbon storage is, well, it seems like a vital tool in the climate fight. We probably can't get to our goals without it.
Seems likely, especially for those hard-to-abate sectors and removals.
But it is absolutely not an unlimited panacea. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Sure.
The new science gives us a much clearer, much smaller budget.
A finite budget.
And maybe even more importantly, it highlights this absolutely enormous challenge of deployment speed. The scale-up required is just staggering.
It really is. And if you connect all the dots, maybe the real headline isn't, do we have enough space? It's more like, will we build enough infrastructure fast enough to even make the space constraints relevant?
That's a powerful thought. If we spend this decade just debating the theoretical limits,
We might waste the critical time we need to actually start building at scale. We run out of the capacity that truly matters, the capacity to act.
so this knowledge really forces you listening, to think about our climate strategies with more precision, more realism, and definitely more urgency. What stands out most to you from all this? How does it shift your view on the path to net zero?
Yeah, how does knowing storage is both limited and incredibly slow to scale up change the way we should prioritize solutions?
Worth considering how these insights could shape policy debates and innovation right where you are. It's a complex challenge, and one we all need to engage with.
Monitoring with building trust.